Wilson, a man in his early 40s, had always prided himself on the stability of his life. A loving husband to Lori, his high school sweetheart, their marriage had seemed like a picture-perfect reflection of love and success. They lived in a charming home on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by peaceful greenery. Their life together was calm, routine, and comfortable. But beneath the surface, something was stirring. Wilson couldn't quite place it yet, but he felt a shift, a subtle unease that hinted everything might not be as flawless as it seemed. Wilson started to notice small, uncharacteristic changes in Lori. She had always been the attentive, loving wife, but recently, she seemed distracted, her thoughts elsewhere. Her usual warmth had cooled, and she became more secretive, often disappearing into another room with her phone, her conversations laced with hushed tones. At first, Wilson dismissed it as stress from work or the pressures of everyday life. But as days passed, his instincts told him something was off. Then, one evening, when they had friends over, Lori's behavior was striking. She laughed a little too freely at a joke from their close friend Mark, and the lingering touches and shared glances between them didn't go unnoticed. A sick feeling curled in Wilson's stomach, a growing suspicion that perhaps his wife was involved in something far more than innocent friendship. It wasn't long before Wilson's suspicions turned into undeniable truth. He had come home early from work one afternoon, thinking to surprise Lori, but what he saw instead took the breath from his lungs. There, in their living room, were Lori and Mark, locked in a passionate embrace. The sight was like a cruel slap, each moment burning its way into his mind. His heart pounded in his chest as he stood frozen at the doorway. Shock, anger, and betrayal flooded him in waves, but he couldn't move. He didn't want to let them know he was there. He didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing he had caught them. Wilson took a slow, steady breath, clenching his fists to maintain control. He knew that he had to remain calm. Instead of confronting them in the heat of the moment, he quietly turned around, retreating to the car parked outside. His mind raced with emotions, but he steeled himself. This wasn't the time for a reckless outburst. Back in the solitude of his car, Wilson grappled with his feelings. His first instinct was to confront Lori, to scream at her and demand an explanation. But as the seconds ticked by, he realized that would only make things messier. No, he would bide his time. There were too many variables to consider: the family's assets, his business interests, and the delicate balance of his life. He couldn't allow his emotions to cloud his judgment. He needed to secure his wealth, ensure his future, and avoid leaving himself vulnerable in the fallout. The anger was there, burning just beneath the surface, but it was joined by a quiet, calculating resolve. He would watch. He would wait. And when the time was right, he would expose the truth, not just to Lori, but to everyone who had been part of the deception. Wilson began to methodically transfer his assets, moving money into trusted family accounts, ensuring that nothing of value remained in his name. It was a process he carried out in silence, carefully making each move as if it were just another ordinary day. At home, he continued to act as though nothing had changed, maintaining the appearance of a devoted husband. He shared meals with Lori, held her hand during the evenings, and even laughed at her jokes. She, oblivious to his growing awareness of the affair, remained consumed with her secret life. She didn't suspect a thing. Wilson had become a master at playing his role, while in the background, his plans were taking shape. The more Lori distanced herself emotionally, the more focused Wilson became on securing his future. He never spoke of the affair, never let on that he knew. His composure was flawless, a deliberate calm that masked the brewing storm beneath. He would wait until everything was in place. The timing had to be perfect. Nothing could be left to chance. The day of reckoning arrived. Wilson had invited both Lori and Mark over to their home under the pretense of a casual get-together with friends and family. As they sat in the living room, surrounded by people, Wilson calmly revealed what he had known all along. "You think I didn't know?" he asked, his voice steady but cold. "I've been watching you both." The shock on Lori's face was immediate, her eyes wide, her mouth opening in disbelief. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat, and the air grew thick with tension. Without a word, Lori sprang from her seat, her face a mixture of horror and guilt, and fled from the room. Wilson's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos unfolding. As Lori rushed out, Wilson leaned back, allowing himself a small, satisfied breath. His carefully laid plans had worked. The truth had been revealed, and it had come on his terms. Hours later, Lori returned, her face a mess of emotions: anger, desperation, fear. She stormed into the house, her eyes wild. "You can't do this!" she screamed. "I deserve half of everything!" Her words echoed in the empty room, but Wilson remained unfazed. He didn't raise his voice, nor did he show any sign of fear. "No, Lori," he said, his tone icy. "You don't." He leaned forward, his gaze unflinching. "I don't own anything anymore." The truth hit her like a punch to the gut. All the assets she thought she could claim had been transferred, every last penny moved into secure hands. The man she had betrayed was now untouchable. She was frantic, shouting, but Wilson remained calm, his face expressionless. "You'll never get a cent," he added quietly. His calmness only seemed to escalate her panic. "You've lost everything," he said, his voice low but final. Lori's realization hit her like a ton of bricks. Her attempts to hold on to the wealth she had once considered hers crumbled. Enraged, she screamed and raged, but Wilson didn't flinch. His calm demeanor only fueled her fury. "You're nothing now," he said, his voice cold and unwavering. "If you escalate this, your career will be over." The words hung in the air, and Lori, shaking with fury, had no choice but to leave. Wilson watched her walk out the door, his expression neutral. The game was over. She had lost, and now he could begin to rebuild his life on his own terms. Wilson sat alone in the silence of his home, reflecting on how he had navigated the storm of betrayal. The patience and planning had paid off, and he had emerged victorious. His wealth was intact, his power secure, and Lori was gone, her infidelity exposed for all to see. He had cut ties with both her and Mark, ensuring there would be no lingering ties to the past. In this quiet moment, Wilson felt a sense of peace. He had taken control of his life and ended the toxic relationship on his terms, free to start anew.